What is good, Joe? Welcome back to Chris and Ruff Productions. As always, I am Chris, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. So we're going into the second weekend of Superman, and we have a ton of DC Studios news to get into. A lot of this information came per James Gunn from the Josh Horowitz podcast, Happy, Sad, and Confused, as well as just tidbits from all of the Hollywood trades. Um, so let's go ahead and get into it and not waste any more time. All right. So per Forbes, Superman is expected to reach 400 million by the end of the second weekend. Of course, Ralph and we've seen the movie twice. We have our spoiler review on our channel. I'll link it down below in the description if you want to check that out. And I thoroughly enjoyed the film overall. So it's good to see that it's going to crack 400 million per Forbes by the end of the second weekend. I'm sure if you're following the box office reports as well as I am, you see that domestically it's doing gangbusters. It is having a good time over here in the States. But overall, internationally, outside of the US market, it's not doing so strong. Just in general, as compared to like a Jurassic World. Next weekend is the release of Marvel Studios' Fantastic Four First Steps. So I am curious to see exactly how much you can squeeze out this next week before the next weekend, which I'm sure it's still going to make money. But when you have another blockbuster coming out next week, it's bound to have a little bit of a drop off. So for Superman itself, I think having a 400 million by the end of the second weekend is it's I think it's everything that Warner Brothers Discovery and DC Studios expected and what they wanted, because the last thing you want is this movie to not even crack 300, 350 and kind of fizzle out from there, maybe crack 400. But for it to already hit 400, that's a very, very good sign that it could reach 550, 600, maybe 650. That's pushing it, but maybe 650 by the end of its theatrical run. And of course, once it's out of theaters and onto the market for video on demand, of course, streaming, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, and all that good stuff, I'm sure it's going to make more money then. But very much deserving. And like I mentioned, I think this is what DC Studios needs, and it's to have a successful superhero movie, um, as per Superman. And one way to look at it as, well, this is the beginning of a universe. You're supposed to have $1 billion film, but Iron Man wasn't $1 billion film. No Superman movie has ever come close to $1 billion. Not even BVS, and that had Batman in it. So, um, good to see that this movie is keeping legs into the second weekend, and we'll see how it performs next weekend. All right, speaking of Superman, just mentioned Batman. The third member of the Trinity, of course, is Wonder Woman. So a Wonder Woman movie is being fast tracked. So this is coming off of the heels of Superman and its opening success. Per James Gunn, there's no casting that has taken place as of right now. And as you see this beautiful art, this is from comic book artist Greg Smallwood. He's worked with Tom King for Human Target, which is a series I really do recommend. But as far as Wonder Woman, for Lost Paradise, right, which was announced back in January 2023, uh, James Gunn has mentioned that there's still movement on that, and that they, having come off of the success of Superman, that they want to have, Wonder Woman come off and just, you know, do well. And the thing about Wonder Woman, of course, it's not going to be Gal Gadot. We're moving on from the past DCEU actors overall for these main characters. And Wonder Woman is a character that I think needs to be in the zeitgeist. She made $1 billion back in 2017 with Wonder Woman, right? Was it $1 billion? I think. Let me, I can just be saying this and not even know. Let me see. Wonder Woman 2017 box office. Not 2027, 2017 box office. Oh no, 821. I'm getting it confused with Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel made 1 billion. But Wonder Woman made 800 million, which is still more than any Superman movie. Well, Superman 78 if you adjust for inflation. Anyways, that's not the point. Um, she needs to be part of the DCU. I think sooner rather than later. And you know, I did a fan casting video. Again, I'll link it down below if you want to check it out. I do have a couple of choices that I have in mind for who I want to see. I won't mention them because if you want to hear my choices, you can go and check out that video. But we need Wonder Woman in the DCU, like I said, soon. And it being fast tracked, what that means is essentially that they can probably, well, they'll start casting. Obviously, this is all assumptions, but I'm sure they'll start casting within the next handful of months, and hopefully they start shooting by next summer or maybe late next year. They'll start having this movie in production, boots on the ground filming, and yeah, I was excited to see Wonder Woman. She is my favorite woman superhero of all time, as for a lot of people. But I'm excited to see what they do for her movie going forward. And speaking of being fast tracked, this is quite the opposite. As of right now, there are no plans for Flash or Aquaman within the next 2 years. This is per James Gunn. Um, so Flash 2020, what 2023, right? Was the Ezra Miller Flash with Keaton and Sasha Calle, which was the multiverse Flashpoint version of the DCEU. Um, Overall, not a strong film. I do like elements of it. I will say, obviously, the CGI in a lot of the movie is lackluster to say the least. But as far as the Flash as a character, it's unfortunate that as of right now, plans can change. He's not in the near future. And as for Aquaman, he made $1 billion. And his second movie, which we all thought, when I say we, most people assumed was just gonna tank, it made I think 400, close to 450, if not more. And I don't think it didn't crack 500, which is obviously a drop off compared to the first one. But for that movie and the lack of marketing and the overall, from my timeline, the lack of excitement from people not even talking about it, Aquaman is still a character that can bring in bank. It's been proven. Okay, but for either of those characters to not have any plans within the next 2 years, it sucks, but at the same time, I understand because you want to focus on the Trinity. Yes, we're getting, a Clayface movie, which we'll talk about later. Of course, we're getting a Supergirl movie, which again we'll talk about later. It's just unfortunate that we won't be seeing these characters anytime soon. Of course, Jason Momoa is no longer Aquaman. He's going to be Lobo in the Supergirl movie. And as of right now, there's no indication if Barry Allen, or excuse me, if the Flash is going to be Barry Allen or Wally West. If I had to choose between the two, I would rather see Wally West. Reason being is because we've seen a lot of Barry Allen. Barry Allen was the DCEU Flash. Barry Allen, the Grant Gustin Flash. So I think let's have a different Flash. Let's have Wally West. That's the one that we have in the Justice League Unlimited series. So I'm all for that. I hope they do that. But again, we shall see. Per James Gunn, there's no further movement on The Authority at the moment. The Authority was one of the films that was announced back in January 2023 in the Gods and Monsters announcement video that James Gunn did. And ever since then, there hasn't really been any movements. I know the engineer who's a part of this group, she appeared in Superman character overall. She had a lot to do for Luther, but yes, in terms of characters, of course, she didn't really stand out compared to like a Superman, a Mr. Terrific, a Guy Gardner, even a Lex Luthor. Of course, those are the bigger characters. Um, but I think I enjoyed her overall as a character. I just wish they have used her in a different way, but that's neither here or there. Um, And James Gunn just went on to mention that the original writer for the movie has moved on to a different DCU project. He did not specify which DCU project it was, or which one, whatever. But you know, the Authority, they can very much be in a Superman sequel, Superman versus the Authority, which is a series run that came out not too long ago. Um, so I am curious whether or not they're just going to eventually scrap this and put the efforts into a different project. I mean, it's not out of the ordinary for a comic book studio or like a comic book movie studio to announce something and eventually cancel it. It happens. I mean, it happened a lot in the DCEU over the years, but it's happened at Marvel. They canceled not Eternals. What's the other group? And Inhumans project. Blade, of course, is still in pre-production hell. It still can't even get off of the ground. And that movie's been in production since 2019, probably even before that, 2018, depending on how long they've been writing it. And it's 2025. So the Authority, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually they do cancel it. And if they don't and they have movement, good. It's good for them. And not so positive news for DC. Well, it's not even about DC. It's more so about the past of what happened. Per James Gunn, DCU job became finalized the same day Henry Cavill was announced to return as Superman. So, of course, we all know Henry Cavill portrayed Superman from the year 2013 all the way to 2022. That is a 9-year run, having BVS, Man of Steel, Justice League, and then Black Adam. Appeared in 4 projects where he was his face. And then the character itself appeared in Shazam and Peacemaker in cameos. And then, of course, the most famous cameo was in the post-credit scene in Black Adam, where we see Henry Cavill for the first time show his face as Superman since, the Snyder Cut, which was what, 2021, and then before that was the Justice League, which was 2017. And it's unfortunate that it worked out this way for Henry Cavill because it wasn't James Gunn's decision to bring him in for a post-credit scene in the Happy Sad podcast with Josh Horowitz. It was alluded by James Gunn. Of course, we can't say this is exactly what he meant, but we can kind of put 2 and 2 together that it was The Rock that was forcing his way into DC and trying to have his vision, him being at the center, of course, and he kind of forced a Henry Cavill cameo onto DC, and we can get that's a whole separate video on that whole debacle, that whole mess. But it's unfortunate because, me personally, I'm not a big fan of Man of Steel as a movie whole. I think Henry Cavill, I would have loved to see him get a second shot as Superman, especially in a solo movie. But at the end of the day, we didn't. Of course, right now we have David Corenswet, and I think the DC studios, the future is brighter than ever, and I can't wait for him. But Henry Cavill, he seemed like a good guy, and it just sucks that it worked out that way for him personally. And people want to take it out on James Gunn, like, oh, it's it, it's not his fault that the day the contract was signed for him to join DC, that they went out of their way and announced a Superman that wasn't even his choice to begin with. So it just sucks all around, the whole situation for Henry Cavill. And I should have wrote this down, but I didn't. That James Gunn, the day that he spoke to Henry about no longer moving forward as Superman, mentioned to him that in the future, if he's open to it, there is a DCU role for him, of course, not Superman, and that James Gunn said he would love to cast Henry Cavill in a future project. So we can spend all day speculating who that could be, what that can look like. I don't even have right now off the top of my head characters who he can be. But we shall see going forward. All right, in other news, this was just the first official poster for Supergirl, which releases June 26, 2025. Spoilers at this point. If you're watching this video, then I'm sure you've seen Superman. Um, Supergirl pops up at the end of the movie, right before the credits roll. And she personally was, I think, my second favorite character after Mr. Terrific. And she was only on the screen for like 30 seconds. So for to have that impact on me as a character, I love it, and I can't wait till Supergirl, originally titled Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which of course is going to be based off of the Tom King run, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Um, so Millie Alcock, she's been posting about her as Supergirl. Her James Gunn and all the DC posted this poster. So the original tagline for Superman was "Look Up," which is actually a really dope tagline. But she has a different version, and that's "Look Out," because Supergirl is going to be a little edgier because of the journey that she was taken upon, whether by choice or not, which it wasn't by her choice because of what happened to her in Krypton, or happened when the story about Superman and all that. Um, so I can't wait for this. Ralph, he is right now. He's on a Supergirl kick. She's like his favorite character in DC right now, and I'm super excited for this movie. I can't wait. And like I mentioned, it comes out June 26, 2025. Oh, not 2025, 2026. I need to fix that. That's a typo. Um, but yeah, Supergirl. She just looks like a fun character. Really fun character. All right, and last news, I actually had another piece of news and I accidentally deleted it. It was about Batman. It wasn't about Batman Brave the Bold because there's not much movement on that as of right now. More so that James Gunn said that they're still on track for the Batman Part 2 and they start filming early next year. Actually, that's not really news. We all kind of hoped that was the news. But okay. All right, going on. Clayface. So Clayface is a solo project coming out September of next year. This is how James Gunn described it. That is a Blumhouse-like horror film, and filming begins later this year. So a couple of things about Clayface that I actually want to get into real quick. Two things. I don't think it's going to be the Basil Carlo version because this. I don't know where I read this. I could just be making up in my head. I think Clayface takes place in Hollywood, if I'm not mistaken, not Gotham City. So it's gonna have its take on AI and misinformation, and it's gonna be a horror film, a Blumhouse style. So that is beyond exciting because James Gunn's been open about how there is no studio style for DC Studios. That every movie, every project, every show is gonna have its own feel, its own aesthetic, its own story, of course. And the reason why that's not necessarily news, but I think worth mentioning is because as much as I love Marvel Studios, at times they can all blend together in terms of aesthetic, you know. And there are movies over there that have different genres, like Winter Soldier is a spy espionage, Guardians of the Galaxy is a space opera film, Ant-Man is a heist movie, which they all have different premises and they do have different feels. I'm not saying that they all feel the exact same movie, but they all have the same sort of stylized look. It's the Marvel way. So for James Gunn to come out and say that Clayface is going to be a straight up horror movie that can be a Blumhouse production, that gets me 10 times more excited. Even though I'm already excited because Batman's my favorite character and Clayface is a Batman villain. So that's one. Two, I am curious if they are going to have their DCU Batman pop up at the end of this film or at any point of this movie. Um, Me personally, if James Gunn said, Chris from Chris and Ruff Productions, I need your help. Should we have Batman pop up at the end of the movie? I would say yes. I think it would just that ending. For an example, I have this manifestation of how I want the movie to end, where Clayface is in Hollywood. Eventually, he gets stopped by I don't know what entities, gets taken to Gotham City, and then we see Batman with him or their first interaction or whatever. I could be wrong. The movie could take place in Gotham the whole time, and I'm just making this up in my head. Who knows? But like I mentioned, filming begins later this year, so uh, hopefully we get some set photos and we see how Clayface may look. Is of course, it's going to be CG involved, but I wonder what if they're going to do like a practical suit in general. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I have for you. um, for our DC news update. So as always, like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below. Out of all the news that I mentioned, which one sort of perked up your ears? Is it the Supergirl poster? Is it the Henry Cavill, unfortunate news? Is it the Wonder Woman being fast tracked, or is it Superman making $400 million? So comment down below your thoughts on this DC news. And as I mentioned, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. As always, guys, I'm Chris. Catch y'all next time. Peace.